and they don't really like me. Cause I can fuck your bitch and fuck your mom and auntie.
This video will be discussing elder abuse. The story of Stan Lee is that of legends. Starting work in the 1930s, the artist would rise through the ranks, help win World War II, marry the love of his life, raise his daughter, and grow Marvel Comics into a behemoth. By the time he hit his 90s, he was beloved across the globe for his cameos in the cinematic universe he helped birth. Though he had his highs and lows throughout the decades, most of the outside world assumed Mr. Lee was living happily, looking at the joys his characters had brought the world as he passed away at the age of 95 in 2018. Unfortunately, this was not the case, as the final years of the comic book genius's life were filled with turmoil, manipulation, and elder abuse. To better understand how this could have happened, we first need to go behind the scenes, where it becomes clear that Stan Lee's family life had been troubled for quite some time. His daughter developed a reputation for wild spending, to the point that it became financially devastating. It's estimated she squandered approximately $20,000 to $40,000 every month.
Wow, that's some fucking nut-ass shit.
Goods. While initially able to sustain his daughter's habits, by 2014 his health rapidly declined. Lee specifically suffered from macular degeneration, which made it impossible to read any small lettering. It was for this reason that despite an estimated net worth of over $50 million, the Marvel legend often struggled to make ends meet. The elderly parents of the 60-some-year-old made numerous attempts to limit her spending. In one instance, they decided to cancel JC's credit cards. This reportedly led her to call Stan and Joni over 50 times every day, ranting that they'd never given her enough money or opportunities. Stan later said of his daughter, "She's a schizophrenic. She's got paranoia. I have tried for many, many years, starting when we lived in New York to get her help, and never could find any. And every year, every day, she just grows worse and worse and worse." One of the most shocking incidents would occur shortly before JC's 64th birthday in 2014.
She old as
that
shit,
year, her parents gifted her a luxury Jaguar vehicle, valued at $95,000. Things appeared to go well at first, until it came time to sign the paperwork. Inside, she discovered that the vehicle hadn't been purchased outright, but instead leased under her father's name. Outraged, a heated argument erupted that quickly escalated to violence. JC allegedly grabbed her 92-year-old mother by one arm and shoved her against a window. Stan, sitting in a chair nearby, was shocked. According to a witness, he shouted, "I've had it. You ungrateful bee. I'm going to stick you in a little apartment and take away all your credit cards." In a fit of rage, JC then reportedly took a hold of his neck and slammed her father against the chair's wooden backing.
What
this
the
attack
fuck,
led the elderly couple to be covered in severe bruises and other injuries, while her mother asked their business manager at the time to take photos as evidence. She begged the incident to be kept a family secret. As The Hollywood Reporter describes, Stan was rather passive, with the Joni always more successful at handling their unruly daughter. So even though they had dysfunction in their lives,
I didn't even know about this
Stan was protected. Because of this, it was a tragedy in more ways than one when Mrs. Lee passed away 3 years later.
Daughter was fucking evil as shit.
With her mother out of the picture, JC now exercised full control over her elderly father, who was in no position to defend himself. And being the couple's only child, upon his death, she would essentially inherit the entire fortune. Because of this, the already unstable reality of Stan Lee began to collapse further, as a cast of shady characters entered the picture, all positioning themselves for a portion of his comic book wealth. Things started getting suspicious in December, when a police report was filed regarding a forged check that withdrew $300,000 from Stan Lee's bank account. This led to an audit, where an additional $850,000 was discovered to have been stolen as well.
Let me guess, JC took
as a loan to the Hands of Respect LLC, a merchandising company owned by Stan's longtime publicist, Jerry Olivares. When questioned, Jerry argued that Lee had presented the check as a thank you present, claiming he'd given Stan a new lease on life after his wife's passing. The nearly $1 million discrepancy, on the other hand, was used to purchase a condo. As it turns out, Jerry had quietly managed to gain the power of attorney, subsequently inserting himself into the elderly writer's last will. He then had the couple's banker of 26 years fired, before allegedly transferring a total of $4.6 million from Stan Lee's accounts. Regardless of what the publicist claimed, Lee seemed adamant that he hadn't consented to either transaction. This is sick. Thereafter.
This is sick, bro. What they was doing to Stan Lee. This is sick. This is sick.
Further investigation would reveal even more nefarious behavior. Jerry's merchandising company had actually publicly collaborated with the celebrity before. Shortly after the 2017 Las Vegas shooting, Hands of Respect began selling various issues of Marvel comic books stamped with Stan Lee's blood. Stating that the icon had been moved by the community's response of blood donations to help victims, the publicist reportedly forged documents, instructing Lee's personal nurse to drain several vials for unspecified medical reasons. Once he'd taken the blood, Jerry then had it turned into solvent DNA ink. These allegations would later be the basis of a lawsuit filed in April of 2018. As if these claims weren't bad enough, the story of Stan Lee's final year on Earth only becomes more and more tragic from here on out. We'll learn more about this after a brief word from our sponsor.
Oh my god.
Shortly before the release of Avengers Infinity War in 2018, and during the early days of the Me Too movement, rumors that Stan Lee had been groping nurses began to surface on the World Wide Web. Citing an anonymous source, the Daily Mail reported that every woman sent to visit his home had been harassed with requests of being pleasured. The author of this piece notes that upon contacting the company, a representative confirmed they'd received several complaints about the Spider-Man creator. His new attorney, Tom Lawless, issued a formal statement responding to the article, declaring the allegations as not only untrue, but an attempt at blackmail. Mr. Lee categorically denies these false and despicable allegations, and he fully intends to fight to protect his stellar good name and impeccable character. We are not aware of anyone filing a civil action or reporting these issues to the police, which for any genuine claim would be the more appropriate way for it to be handled. Instead, Mr. Lee has received demands to pay money, and threats that if he does not do so, the accuser will go to the media. 2 days later, the Daily Mail released a second article claiming that the 95-year-old had drunkenly groped a masseur several times before masturbating. Their source was quoted as stating, Maria Carballo made a complaint to his people and apparently has demanded money. There's been a lot of meetings about it behind the scenes. While people might think Stan is a frail and fragile old man, that's not the case. He's very strong for his age, and still has his wits about him. This kind of behavior has been going on for years, and the incident with the masseuse was before his wife died. His age is no excuse. This time, the victim did file suit against Mr. Lee, seeking an excess of $50,000 in damages.
Just to get some money, yo.
The case would be dismissed following his passing, never reaching a definitive conclusion. Also named in Caballo's lawsuit was Lee's assistant, Max Anderson, alleging that he had arranged the sessions.
All these people just leeching off of this old-ass fucking man. Yo, that shit's sick.
For the pop-up Stan Lee Museum. Though a long-standing
just doing anything to get money from it, that shit's sick.
Having a violent criminal record. One even stated, I honestly believe that Max is very dangerous, and has the ability and rage to actually kill one of us. Shortly after the publicist's excommunication, Max too would be accused of skimming money.
They made his last living years on Earth a living fucking hell because of their own greed, bro. That shit is crazy.
Adamant that he was innocent, Max swore revenge against against the man he claimed to have framed him, a 40-year-old memorabilia collector named Kia Morgan. Described by The Hollywood Reporter as being a gossipy, fast-talking name-dropper who frequently threatens litigation, Anderson suspected that Morgan was conspiring with JC to consolidate power over Stan. He even went so far as to claim that Morgan was likely the anonymous source speaking with the Daily Mail, but to this day, it's still not certain who was leaking information. It is worth pointing out, though, that just days before Anderson's ousting, Stan Lee had drafted a damning legal declaration with the help of his lawyer. The written statement directly implicated Morgan as a bad actor, giving necessary insight to how intense the infighting had become. The document begins with details of JC's violent outbursts. It then emphasized her lack of financial independence, stating, "Throughout her adult life, JC has never held any meaningful job, has not been gainfully employed, and has not generated any significant income from salary and wages." The declaration goes on to identify alleged bad actors, namely Jerry Alvarez, Kia Morgan, and Kurt Schenk, who was his daughter's lawyer. It explains that due to having very few adult friends, JC was extremely vulnerable to manipulation. The document reads, "It is my belief and opinion that Alvarez, Morgan, and Schenk are A. bad actors with bad intentions, B. not trustworthy, C. have identified JC as a vulnerable woman without a support system who is an easy target for predators, D. have insinuated themselves
using her
into
for money,
relationships with JC for an ulterior motive and purpose, and
E. that money was Stan Lee money.
Relationships with JC to try to take advantage of me and gain control over my assets, property, and money,
this is crazy,
but not limited to valuable intellectual property." Due to Stan's advanced stage, it was difficult for him to formalize business and financial decisions by himself. The statement claims that JC
this is like the sickest fucking story of real life greed I've probably ever heard.
It describes her even yelling, screaming, and shouting.
But this to happen to a person like Stan Lee is that shit is sick,
this was unethical on her lawyer's behalf. The document was notarized on February 13th, 2018. A week later, a second declaration was written by one of Stan Lee's home nurses named Linda Sanchez. It begins with a rather telling introduction. "I am afraid to become involved in this matter because I have been threatened by Morgan JC and Schenk with the loss of my job, loss of income, and public humiliation, among other things. Nevertheless, after much prayer and soul-searching, I have decided to sign this declaration because I believe I have both a legal and moral duty to help and protect Mr. Lee." She claims that the three had recently required all of Lee's nurses to sign non-disclosure agreements prohibiting the discussion of anything witnessed in his home. Because she happened to not be present that day, Linda managed to be exempt. Eventually, Schenk realized she hadn't signed the NDA. Out of desperation, he reportedly took out his cell phone to record himself intimidating her, but was not successful. Most interesting was the nurse's experience with Morgan, which seemed to corroborate Anderson's allegation. Linda revealed, "Morgan in particular has attempted to intimidate me to keep me from telling the truth. He threatened that if I do report the acts of elder abuse that I have witnessed, he will go to the press and disclose a DUI that I received when I was 21 years old." In addition, within the past month, I was interviewed by Mr. Ryan Perry of the Daily Mail. Mr. Perry stated that he received information from JC and Morgan indicating that I was allegedly having an affair with Mr. Lee, and was allegedly seen nude in the shower with Mr. Lee. These despicable lies are false and untrue, and known by Morgan and JC to be false and untrue. It became clear to her that all of this was beginning to wear on Stan. In that same time period, he'd begun suffering from pneumonia, even being temporarily hospitalized. In private, he told Linda that as a result of the present situation, he had nothing to live for, except to go to sleep and die. The document concludes its description of abuse by stating, "As a result of everything described above, Mr. Lee falls into very dark and depressed moods, because he doesn't have the strength or will to fight anymore." Due to these declarations, both she and Lawless were fired. And sure enough, in late February, an article by the Daily Mail about her departure happened to include details of her criminal record, as well as the alleged affair. Now, despite Max Anderson's questionable past and
Bro,
behavior, he was
he
considered by
just stopped
Stan's
trying, bro.
associates
Like,
to
he
be
didn't
an
even have the
excellent
strength to
caregiver.
keep fighting
In
no more.
March, several industry veterans spoke out publicly over concern of Stanley's safety, specifically because Max was no longer involved. In a statement to the pop culture website Bleeding Cool, comic book artist J. Scott Campbell wrote, "Forcibly cutting Max out of Stan's life and so soon after his wife Joni has passed seems particularly cruel to both of them, and has caused a lot of us in our industry to talk, much of it about our collective concern about the mystery of who exactly is taking care of Stan now, and why he is being kept out of sight and in his home. Max took much better care of Stan than this. I have great concern for Stan, and I do hope more in our industry start speaking up, start asking more questions, and start shining more of a bright light on this situation to find out what's exactly going on here before it's too late." To many, it felt as if JC and Morgan were cutting off as much of Stan's original team as they could in order to make him fully dependent on them. Mike Kelly, who'd been one of Lee's assistants for nearly 25 years, had previously visited him nearly every day for one-on-one meetings. Eventually, stipulations were enforced requiring them to happen less frequently, be pre-approved, and attended by a supervisor. Even Stan's housekeeper, as well as gardener, who had both been with him for decades, were fired. They even went so far as to change Lee's phone number and personally took control of his email. With poor vision and extremely basic knowledge of technology, Stan could no longer speak to anyone without their help. Thankfully, it was not all hopeless. The public spectacle had led many journalists to begin investigating, namely Alan Duke and Gary Baum. Alan had been following the story for years prior, interviewing several ex-employees and other witnesses. Gary contacted Mr. Duke and used much of his research as groundwork for an article that became a bombshell upon release. On April 10th, 2018, The Hollywood Reporter published "Stan Lee Needs a Hero: Elder Abuse Claims and a Battle Over the Aging Marvel Creator." Beginning as an inquiry into Lee's general health, by the end there were clear suspicions of elder abuse. It was only after this piece that the public became aware of who was actually responsible for supposedly taking care of the elderly superstar, exposing much of the information we've covered here today. In what appeared to be an attempt at damage control, Morgan had Lee record 2 videos for the author. This was actually a common technique by Morgan, in which he instructed Mr. Lee on what to say before filming. Stan himself would later refer to these as hostage videos. The first showed him retroactively denying the declaration, claiming he'd been tricked and it was totally incorrect, inaccurate, misleading, and insulting. Bear in mind that Lawless swore under oath that because of his macular degeneration, the document was read for him in its entirety, word for word, line by line, sentence by sentence, from beginning to end. The second had him claim that Morgan was a good friend, before stating his daughter was wonderful. In the days following the article's publication, another video was published of Stan angrily denying the claims of elder abuse while threatening legal action. It did little to convince anyone of anything but the urgent need for further investigation. A month later, on June 14th, a temporary restraining order was granted preventing Morgan from interacting with Lee in any capacity. He was being formally accused of elder abuse. Despite no longer serving as Stan's attorney, Lawless had filed a petition alleging that the man isolated Mr. Lee and embezzled artwork, cash, and other assets worth more than $5 million. He then filed a second 263-page-long document detailing a multitude of other incidents witnessed throughout the entire ordeal. The attorney recalled that while still representing Stan, Morgan admitted that he wanted to acquire the rights to exploit Mr. Lee's name, identity, likeness, and signature during Mr. Lee's lifetime and after his death. Following this, the restraining order was extended to 3 years. It seems that at some point throughout the article's fallout, JC and Morgan turned on each other, with Stan's daughter actually helping file the case. The announcement was seen as a unanimous victory, with Lee's actual attorney stating his client's health appeared to be improving. Morgan didn't give up though, and began making phone calls to as many journalists as he possibly could. He intended to whistleblow JC's abusive behavior while also making the claim that he had been with Stan for over 10 years. On October 8th, Stan Lee would break his silence in an interview with Mark Ebner for the Daily Beast. With his breath labored, Lee displayed an impressive level of benevolence to all the parties involved. When the interviewer expressed their sympathies about the controversy, he responded, "There really isn't that much drama. As far as I'm concerned, we have a wonderful life. I'm pretty damn lucky. I love my daughter. I'm hoping that she loves me, and I couldn't ask for a better life. If only my wife was still with us. I don't know what this is all about." When asked about Kia Morgan, he replied, "He was a guy helping me. I can't do everything. I thought he'd maybe help JC. It didn't work. In fact, he turned out to be quite a disappointment. I think he was wanted by the police, but I'm not sure." For what it's worth, from this interview, it appears that Stan was suffering from memory loss. He couldn't recall any details of the events that happened just months prior, and even confused JC's lawyer as someone they'd known for over 40 years. When asked if he had anything left on his wish list, Stan simply replied that "I leave everyone happy when I leave." 3 months later, on November 12th, 2018, the creative mind behind the now multi-billion-dollar superhero machine passed away at the age of 95 after suffering from congestive heart failure. Jonathan Bolerjack, one of his assistants at the time, said of the last time he bid farewell, "Some nights I would leave and think, oh, this could be the night, because Stan didn't look that great, but he looked fine as I headed out. Looking back, I feel comfortable saying Stan was a free man that night. Kia was gone, Max and Jerry were long gone, and JC wasn't there then. I like to think his life ended on his own terms." In May of 2019, Kia Morgan was officially arrested on account of multiple felony charges, including theft, embezzlement, and forgery. He pleaded not guilty, and as of writing is still awaiting trial. Morgan claims to have recorded thousands upon thousands of hours of conversations, allegedly planting video and tape recorders all over the home. It's unknown for what purpose or if they will ever see the light of day. For unknown reasons, the case against Jerry Olivares appears to have been dropped, with the former publicist keeping hundreds of thousands of dollars. Being the sole child, JC, now under full control of the Lee estate, has used Stan's money to fire a multitude of lawsuits. In an attempt to reclaim his intellectual property, she filed a frivolous suit against POW Entertainment, resulting in her receiving a $1 million sanction. And finally, in a turn of events, as of 2021, JC, along with other comic artist heirs, are in a legal battle with Marvel in an effort to retain their copyright.
I think if there's anything to be taken away from this story, it's the importance of having an advocate in the corner of elderly people. And with that thought, I think I'll end the video here. So until next time, thanks for watching.
That was fucking sick, bro.
For this life I cannot change. Hit it, keep off in the main. Eminem, sweet like candy cane. Drop the top, pop it, let it bang.